So, Patrick Obath, you'll walk to the podium and you'll talk to us this morning on developing ethical leadership. Who is an ethical leader? As we've heard from Polycarp, and we'll hear from you as well in the course of the program. We want to drill deeper as we're getting up towards general election. Then how can we elect an ethical leader? But before we head there, we want to see what happened last week, previously. And maybe as we're also heading towards a general election, the proper question will be to you Kenyans. Are you as a Kenyan ready to elect an ethical leader? Are you as a Kenyan lady to elect an ethical leader? Will you elect an ethical leader come the August 8th, 2017? Hit us on Twitter. AM Live NTV is a Twitter handle. AM Live NTV is a profile name on Facebook, and 20505 is our SMS portal. We want now to embark on the prepared speeches from our panelists this morning, who will talk to us about developing ethical leadership, even as we're getting up towards general election. And first up on the podium is Patrick Obath. Patrick Obath is an associate director at Adam Smith International Africa Limited. He is also a managing consultant for Eduardo Associate. Patrick has been involved intimately in the business community in Kenya and East Africa at the top level since 2005, and is also past chairman of KEPSA. He holds a BSc in mechanical engineering from Nottingham University. Patrick, you have 5 minutes beginning now.
Okay, I think before we talk about ethical leadership, let's talk about what is ethics first of all. And I think there are no universally agreed rules about ethics. There's no absolute standard that you can apply to ethics. And also, when you try and have a reference point of what ethics is, there isn't a firm reference point that can always go back to there and universally define ethics at that point. I think the right and wrong behaviors as well come into play. And what is wrong behavior? What is right behavior at the end of the day? It's within a given context as well. The other thing that I like to add on into the fray is that ethics does not equate to what is legal. So law is not ethics, neither is ethics law from that point of view. And for want of completeness, I would also like to say that religion is not a basis for arriving at a consistent ethical standard. It is one of the contributory factors in that. So just like law, religion is not an absolute standard for something that is ethical. So when you find people saying that I have my rights in law, I have my rights in this and so forth, that does not define your ethical platform at all. So I think the first thing that you have to look at is what is an ethical leader within that framework. I think the whole essence is that there has to be an agreed set of values within the environment in which you're operating as a leader. And once those values have been defined, and for us in Kenya, they're defined very clearly within the constitution of this country. And that definition of the ethical leadership in this country has come from a wide cross-section of the community in Kenya. Religious leaders were involved, lawyers were involved, social anthropologists, you name it, the works, and those values within our constitution are very clear expectations of the ethical behavior. So the first thing is that if you're an ethical leader, you have to live by the values and principles that are eschewed by the society in which you live. There isn't an absolute set of values, but the societal values that exist. So when you look at our ethical leaders, if you look at ethical leaders in the concept in Kenya, they have to live by the values that are eschewed in the constitution. And you have to live them all the time. It has to be the way you live. So you have to talk those values, you have to live those values, and you have to ensure that the people who are around you are also living exactly the same values. Ethical leaders also, I think, have to be completely naked. I think the easiest way to make yourself believable within people is to have nothing hidden. So when you hear about the fact that people are required to declare their wealth, for example, why are people afraid? What are they hiding? If you want to be an ethical leader and be recognized as such, be completely naked, be open, be vulnerable, as they say. Because the minute you're vulnerable, there is nothing left to worry about. You're completely open. People will begin to trust you as a leader. And that really, for me, is a key definition of what an ethical leader is. So how do you see an ethical leader? How do you recognize them? I think, one, they do not intentionally convey deception. Sometimes you see people talking and you can see automatically this person doesn't mean what they're saying. So they don't intentionally convey deception. An ethical leader also puts the concerns of others above theirs. So, as was said earlier on, they actually bring everybody into the fray. An ethical leader respects the opinions of other people and includes that within their narrative. And also, you defend others when they are censured so that they believe in you as well, so that they support you. And the other thing about an ethical leader is that they are consistent with the treatment that they give everybody. So effectively, doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, you are treated exactly the same way by that person. So again, this whole issue of which part of Kenya you come from, who you are, and everything basically disappears out of areas. And again, you have clear and uniform policies, and you are consistent in implementation of what you do. The issue of being influenced by X and Y and so forth means that effectively you are still being swayed around. You cannot hold your head up high. And I think the key thing, the golden rule of leadership as well, which is part of ethical leadership, is you have to accommodate everybody that is there. And one other aspect that I like to put on ethical leadership is that you focus on the success of the people you're leading, not on your own ego. A lot of leaders tend to focus on their ego and who they are, rather than the people who are around them. And for me, those are the key issues that define an ethical leader. Thank you.
Right. Big hand for Patrick. Up next, we have with us on the podium right now, Polycarp Igathe, who is the Managing Director of Vivo Energy Kenya, a company behind Shell brands in Kenya. Also, he's a trustee of KEPSA Foundation. Previously, Poly was the Managing Director of Harco Tiger Brands. He has held senior commercial management positions at East Africa Breweries, Coca-Cola, Nairobi Bottlers, and Africa Online, where he played key roles in sales, distribution, branding, and marketing. He's a member Advisory Council of Kenya Association of Manufacturer, and also he served in senior executive roles in multinationals. Of course, he holds a BA in economics, I should say, from University of Nairobi. Also is a graduate of IECE Business School Advanced Management Program, which he undertook in 2009. Polycarp, you have 5 minutes beginning now. Talk to us on who an ethical leader is all about.
Thank you so much, Debarl, and lovely to be with my colleagues this morning. I would say an ethical leader is 4 things. Number one, first and foremost, an ethical leader is an individual or a person, a leader who does not sell his soul. And I'll come back to what I mean by selling his soul. Secondly, it's an ethical leader is somebody who really has a very minimal gap or zero gap between what they say and what they do. And thirdly, an ethical leader does not just believe in performing, they also behave. They don't just believe in doing the right thing, they believe in doing it the right way. So if you're running a business, you don't want just to be successful, create so many profits and hurt so many people. So you behave and you do the right way. I'll come back to selling your soul. And I'll use real examples in our country that have told me that this subject of ethical leadership is important. Kenya has enjoyed close to 15 years, from 03. We've never had a year where we have not recorded GDP growth. But 15 years of GDP growth, which is a very good story. We are paying our debts and doing everything. But on the other hand, we're not being able to lift this plane. It's not taking off. It's a low-flying bird. Why? I think the problem lies in the subject we're speaking about today, Debarl. It's because many of our leaders have sold their souls. Many don't do what they say. Many of us leaders clearly have forgotten that we've left a huge portion of the people we lead behind. I'll give you an example. I'll start with us in the private sector. I'll start by challenging ourselves. We are very fond of challenging government. There was a bank that was in trouble with the regulator not too long ago, the Imperial Bank of Kenya. I just want to show you ethics. That bank for 8 years in a row won the best financial reporting awards from the Institute of Certified Public Accountants of Kenya. Now, even before we go to court or go to the regulator, shouldn't we have court as leaders in private sector and ask ISPAC, explain to us how would the best financial reporting award-winning financial reporting award bank be the one that has really taken away with depositors' money? That's ethics. I'm giving you a real example. Give you another example. A couple of individuals have won an award called CEO of the Year in Kenya. I think it was arranged by the Kenya Institute of Management. I can tell you 2 or 3 of those individuals. One, the bank went down. The other, the following year after he won CEO of the Year at Kenya Institute of Management, ended up being arraigned in court for having, he was arraigned in court and the charge was he stole the pension fund of the Medical Research Institute that he was leading. Now, I've just used private sector. Let me not even get started on government because I don't have too much time. We therefore have a crisis of leadership. And what we are doing is we are coddling up to this issue. We are not shut-fronting it and discussing it genuinely. We are skirting around the issue, which is a narcotic of choice in Kenya. We don't go and say, by the way, what is eating us? And therefore, we are confusing our children. The younger generation, we take them to school, we'll tell them this is the way you should do things, and then they see the people we elect, not just in position of political positions, the people we even elect at in parish councils, the people we elect to even lead the wedding committees. How can we be a country that gets it so wrong that any person we pick as a leader is an unethical person? It tells me there's something fundamental with the individual value system of the nation. I'll tell you the last example, which now brings back to elections, and then I'll close. Right, we had somebody saying that attacking the IEBC, appealing a case in court, and saying if this appeal succeeds, we will not have an election. And I'm saying maybe it's frustration, but you cannot challenge the judiciary, truly. That's the only safety valve we have, especially when Parliament is on break. And that's a lack of ethics. So I think I've given enough examples in there to say, let's not skirt around the issue. Let's admit we're in trouble, all of us, and let's stop pointing fingers and go back and fix this issue. And it will not be fixed by the religious leaders or business leaders alone. It will be fixed fundamentally by attending to the right thing with examinations. And I congratulate Matiang'i. What he did with examinations was a real driver of ethics. Bring back integrity. It's not about, don't be ashamed for your grade. So don't be ashamed. So we started to see that, that come back. So let's reduce the gap between what we say and what we do. Let's do the right thing, the right way, and let's stop selling our souls. And that way will be a great country and will certainly take off. Thank you very much.
So are we having a crisis of leadership in the country? And a probing question you ask, how can we be so wrong as a country that we end up electing unethical leaders? Maybe it's a high time that we drill deeper. We try and evaluate where we are as a country and ask ourselves these probing questions. Why do we elect these leaders who are unethical, who are embroiled in corruption? They'll actually pilfer their clammy fingers into the public coffers and steal, and ending up the country, you know, being in a very dire situation where we're always borrowing money to try and, you know, plug holes here and there. So are we confusing our children with the people that we elect? Think about that. Right up next, we will hear from Phyllis Wakiaga this morning to talk to us also on the same topic. She'll walk to the podium. She is the CEO of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. And until her recent appointment as a CEO, Phyllis was head of Policy, Research and Advocacy Unit at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. Since 2013, she represents CAM on the board of the Kenya Industrial Property Institute and is a member of the Kenya Consumer Protection Advisory Committee. Also, before joining CAM, she was a manager for government and industry affairs at Kenya Airways and played a key role in government negotiations on bilateral air services agreements. And still waiting also for them to load up her profile on screen. She is an advocate of the High Court of Kenya and holds a master's in business administration from Jomo Kenyatta University. Phyllis, you have 5 minutes, beginning now.
Thank you, Debarl. Thanks, Polycarp and Patrick, for sharing. Allow me to start with a story that I like about Mahatma Gandhi, who, when you hear about, you think about compassion and ethical leadership. In the 1930s, the story is told, a family had a son who was taking a lot of sugar. So the mother decided to take him to Mahatma Gandhi to speak to him and tell him to stop taking too much sugar. So they walked a number of miles and went all the way to where Mahatma Gandhi was. And when the mother got there, she told Mahatma Gandhi, "My son is taking too much sugar. Why don't you tell him to stop taking sugar?" So Mahatma Gandhi listened and he said, "Okay, do this. Come back and see me in 2 weeks." So the mother went away with the son for 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, she took a long journey back to where he was. And when they got there, the mother said, "Okay, I've brought back my son. You asked me to go. And come back in 2 weeks." So Mahatma Gandhi looks at the son and says, "Stop taking sugar." So the mother waits and wonders, "Okay, you told me to go for 2 weeks. Why are you telling my son to stop taking sugar? You could have said that 2 weeks ago." So when she asked Mahatma Gandhi, why did you ask me to go away? This is something you could have said 2 weeks ago. Mahatma Gandhi said, 2 weeks ago, I was also taking sugar. So what does that point to? It really points to leadership. It points to example. And the fact that to tell people not to do something, you have to actually be leading by example. So leadership is actually not a position or title. It's an action and example. And ethical leadership is about knowing the difference between what you have a right to do and what is right to do. And I think we all know that what is right to do is not always popular. Sometimes the right things to do are the hard things to do. And as leaders, that's the choice we constantly have to keep making. And to be an ethical leader, it's something you have to keep grappling with. Every time you're faced with a difficult decision, which happens all the time for all of us, you have to always make the right choice, and that sometimes is actually the difficult choice. So sometimes, while it might be convenient to think about ethical leadership as a task, a program, a rule book, or something that is out there, it's not something that's out there. It's something that is actually within us. It's in the big and small choices we make. It lives in our decisions as leaders. It lives in our organizational culture, because as leaders, if we lead ethically, that is the culture we perpetuate within the organization, and it calls for a lot of commitment. I was reading a book called The 7 Lenses of Ethical Leadership. It's written by a lady called Linda Fisher Thornton, and she says that we can't get away with externalizing ethics, because ethical leadership is much closer home than we may readily admit. It isn't something that is out there. It's actually with us right here and right now. And you won't find it in the rule book. That's the interesting thing about ethical leadership. You're not going to read a book with all the rules about this is how you do it. No, you won't. What will happen is that it is deeply held within the values that you have, and it's a day-to-day choice. It's the choices we make every day. So allow me to share 2 things about leadership, ethical leadership, that define who an ethical leader is and how you can develop that. First of all, it's the action and the behavior of leaders. We can't talk about ethical leadership without looking at ethical behavior, because your behavior eventually determines who you are. And the choices you make and the behavior you display will determine whether you're an ethical leader or not. And we have numerous examples around us about leaders who we consider to be ethical because of the behavior they have shown, and those we know are not ethical despite what they say because of what they are doing. So ethical behavior in its simplest form is knowing and doing what is right. And the key to having an ethically run company, government, or society is having morally upstanding leaders who choose to do what is right. So that's the first definition. And then secondly, the personality and character of leaders is also critical. And from an ethical perspective, leadership is that is directed by respect for ethical beliefs and the value and dignity and rights of others. The Bible also has its opinion on leadership, and it talks about doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. So how do you do this? By having certain characteristics of trust, honesty, consideration, patience, humility, and kindness. So those values actually espouse ethical leadership. Then I had 4 V's to share about leadership, about how we develop and become ethical leadership. So the 4 V's are the values that we have, the vision that we have, the voice, and the virtue of leaders. In terms of values, our values often define who we are and the choices we make. And for ethical leadership, this begins with an understanding of and commitment to an ethical core of values. So you have to have values that you're committed to espousing. And ethical values by definition are positive, and they require that we stretch outside our own interest to respect, protect, serve, and help others. And by discovering what these values are and living by them, we begin a process of integrating our unique values with our choices. So you see our choices reflecting what our values are. The vision is also important because where there's no vision, people perish. And leadership is really the capacity to translate vision into reality. Voice is important because ethical leaders must be able to articulate their vision to others in an authentic way that really drives them to become ethical themselves. And lastly, virtue, because leadership is about example, as I've said. And the most powerful leadership tool you have is your own example and what you set to others. So allow me to end by a quote by Ellen G. White that says, "The greatest want of the world today is the want of men, men who will not be bought or sold, men who in their innermost souls and true and honest men who do not fear to call sin by its name, and men whose conscience is as true to duty as the needle to the pole, men who will stand for what is right, even if the heavens fall." That for me is an ethical leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Phyllis Wakiaga there, of course, also giving us salient points on what ethical leadership is all about. And you have the 4 V's, the value, the vision, the voice, and virtue, right? Do values define who you are, or what really defines who you are, right? And remember also, leadership is not a positional title, she says. We shall be drilling deeper on this much later in the course of the program right now. We want to hear from Flora Mutahi. She'll walk also to the podium to talk to us on ethical leadership, what she thinks it's all about from her own perspective. She's the founder and CEO of Melvin Mash International Limited. Also, she's a founder and CEO of Azizi Realtors Limited. She's the chair of the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, also a board member of a Jubilee Insurance Company of Kenya, and also a board member of Export Promotion Council. You have 5 minutes, beginning now. Let me try also and reset my stopwatch.
Good morning, and good morning, my panelists. I shall begin again where I began earlier, where I posed the question asking, of the 8,000 people who pose themselves for leadership, if we put a truthometer to them, how many of them were passionate and would be passionate and sincere to serve their community? Is their leadership really for the community, or is it driven by other things? And it then poses the other question, why do we choose leaders? What is our value system? Why do we elect them? Is it their wealth, their popularity, their promises, connections, or ethnic divide? Ethnic leadership is defined as leadership in which individuals demonstrate a conduct for common good that is acceptable and appropriate in every area of their lives. It is governed by respect for ethical beliefs, values, dignity, and the right of others. Such that if I'm a leader who disrespects other people, steals to gain popularity, or actually, makes people fight against each other, I have no business being a leader. I go further to say that an ethical leader is one who has passion, sincerity, and is humane, value-driven, like we've heard from our other panelists. They encourage initiative and they lead, particularly by example. He/she works for the greater good of the community they're serving. Ethics is actually a product of upbringing. It is a product of DNA and an exposure to right or wrong, such that if you have a cattle rustler who has been taught that killing to actually gain cattle is okay, that person really is unethical, but it is ingrained in them. It is ingrained in the way they've been socialized, and not much can be done about that. So when we are choosing, are we choosing somebody who, because of who they are or because of what they actually promise to be. And we need to remember, actions speak louder than words. It is interesting when politicians and people seeking any leadership position come in and say, I will do, I will do, I will do. And we sort of get hooked onto one of the I will do and vote for them. Have we stopped and looked back in their life, in whatever they've done for us, to see whether they actually say and do, do what they say? We seem to also mix up wealth and popularity as good leadership and forget to look at the ethical side of this person. Is wealth really unethical? I don't think so. If wealth is actually correctly gotten, it is not unethical. Again, is a popular person unethical? No, not necessarily. Again, if they've gained their popularity in the right way. However, these two, if they are gained in the wrong manner, then that to me is unethical. And that person has no business being a leader. A person, like I said earlier, needs to be passionate and sincere and willing to serve a community. And we always need to look at what is the motive driving that person. We also need to redefine leadership. As I see in Kenya today, a leader is a person who comes up and promises what they will do for others. And like I mentioned earlier, the sweeter the promise, the more likely we'll elect them. Again, we need to look at the ethics. However, this does not, we also then need to turn around and look at Wanjiku. Look at ourselves. Is Wanjiku choosing a leader because she can gain favor? Perhaps they're from the same ethnic tribe. Worse still, maybe Wanjiku's vote is being bought. I will not go on the voting day unless you give me 50 shillings, 100 shillings. And if that is the case, is Wanjiku ethical? Wanjiku is not being true and sincere to herself and to her community at large. So I would actually say this ethical leadership is a two-sided coin. There is a leader, but who chose the leader? And what are my motives for choosing that leader? It then follows that we must nurture a nation that promotes ethics by providing an environment that shows the importance of positive ethical practices. We must have guidelines and policies that drive people towards ethical practices, values that people follow, norms that are expected in the school curriculums. We must redefine success and shun unethical behavior and perhaps not allow candidates who are ill-begotten to actually run for office. Finally, we must drive ethical leadership through our communities at large and our businesses for our nation to prosper. Let us be ethical and choose ethical leaders if we cannot be those leaders themselves. How do we know an ethical leader? Ethical leaders always know, it has been said today, how to do the right thing. It may be difficult to define what is right, but a leader who is ethical is not afraid to do what they believe in, even if it is unpopular, unprofitable, or inconvenient. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. Flora Mutahi there, giving us also her thoughts about ethical leadership. And she asked this probing question: do we need to redefine leadership in this country, right? And is ethics, is it the product of upbringing? So if we have vices and the moral decadence that we see in the society right now, especially in our country, is it a product of upbringing, right? Good question. And she says that the sweeter the promise, the bigger the chances of election, of someone being elected, right? And she says also, it is a two-sided coin, the leader and the people who elected the leader. So we need to drill deeper and ask ourselves also these abiding questions this morning. Finally, we're going to hear from Kiprono Kittony, right? And I can see also Patrick Obath has to go because he has a meeting this morning, so we'll let him go this morning. Kiprono Kittony is the current national chairman of the Kenya National Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the premier business membership organization in Kenya. Also, he is a well-known personality in the business leadership circles in Kenya, having served in several capacities, including being the immediate past chairman of the Media Association of Kenya. He serves on the Betting Control and Licensing Board. Previously, he has served on the Betting and Control and Licensing Board. Also, he chairs on the AAR Insurance Limited Board, MTech Limited, and Radio Africa Group. Kip, you have 5 minutes. Let me just try and reset my...
Thank you very much, Debarl, and And good morning to my fellow panelists. I'd like to go back to the beginning on this conversation about developing ethical leadership, and I'd like to talk about the journey as a country that we've taken since independence in 1963. If we read the stories of our founding fathers of this country, from 1963 well into the late 70s, a lot of the people in the leadership class in this country, unethical leadership was the exception rather than the rule. People there committed themselves to the service of this nation. We saw GDP growth. We saw Kenyans really espousing the values of ethical leadership. Later on, I don't know when, we need to ask ourselves the question of when did the rain start beating us as a country. But round about the time that multipartyism came in, we started to become a society where the end justifies the means. We started to become a society where people glorified wealth for wealth's sake, without asking themselves the fundamental question of where it was acquired. We started to see people with ill-gotten wealth finding themselves into leadership positions. More recently, in 2010, the new constitution was formulated, and Chapter 6 talks extensively about ethical leadership. And it says that in Section 73, that leadership, the values of leadership are the selection of a leader on the basis of personal integrity and competence. It goes further to say that a leader should be elected in a free and fair process. I fault the architects of this new constitution briefly because in the election process, they mention nothing about ethical leadership. The Section 73 of the Constitution goes further to talk about the values of ethical leadership. The fact that one needs not to have conflicts of interest, making decisions dispassionately based on fair principles, and a whole host of other things. So I would like to encourage Kenyans to read Chapter 6, Section 73 of the new Constitution. So what is an ethical leader? An ethical leader, in my opinion, is one that underpins the more important values and principles of ethical leadership. It's a leader who will ask himself, what is it that I would like to achieve with my leadership? Is a leader who will ask himself a very fundamental question. Could the people I lead in the organization cause me to resign for ethical reasons? How many examples do we have in Kenya of people caught in unethical situations who will not take the honorable step of resigning? An ethical leader is one that will ask himself an important question of what people will say at the end of my tenure in leadership. Now, back to the story of Kenya. The reality of the country that we live in today is that three things continuously undermine ethical leadership. One is poverty, two is corruption, and three is ethnicity. As a country today, and in this country, I will guarantee that today in Kenya, people are faced with a huge challenge with flour costing 200 shillings for 2 kilos, with sugar costing 400 shillings for 2 kilos. So poverty makes it very difficult for people to espouse ethical leadership. In this country today, we know of governors who charge a fee to be seen by people, the general public. Yet these are the general public that elected them. In this country today, we know that if you are stopped at a road traffic by a traffic policeman, the highest chance is that he will want to be, motivated in order to let you go. We live in a country where those people who are at the helm of institutions of governance like parliament today are involved in extortion, they're involved in arm twisting, and they're involved in a whole host of other unethical behavior. In the course of my journey as a business leader, I've encountered two situations where I've had to really challenge myself as to whether or not I'm an ethical leader. As a chairman of Radio Africa Group, in the very, very early stages of the company, we had a situation where one of our top on-air personalities was involved with collusion with a caller who called in on a radio competition where there was a financial reward. And we had a system that actually found that person and caught them red-handed. And that was an on-air personality that was in huge demand by other media houses. So we had to take an ethical call. Should we let that person go on the basis that they were caught red-handed, or should we let them stay because we know that they drive revenue and they're good for the business? We took the call and we said we're going to let them go, and immediately they were taken on by another organization and they went on with their lives. But I believe that we made the right decision because we stood by the decision that supported ethical judgment. More recently, in the Chamber of Commerce, an organization that I lead that has faced serious challenge in terms of ethical leadership. A lot of my predecessors were involved in land grabbing. A lot of the assets that belong to the chamber have actually ended up in third-party hands, simply because of unethical leadership. Recently, my own vice chairman, a great friend, a person I was with in the trenches, was caught in a situation where he was involved in a land transaction of chamber land. I had to let him go despite the fact that we had been in the trenches, somebody we'd worked with for a long time. Now, let's look at the leadership. I think not all is lost. In the public sector, we have many leaders who are examples of ethical leadership. I recently attended the funeral of Dr. Munyo Wayaki, and it was a story of ethical leadership. I attended the book launch of Moody Awori, and again, I went home confident that we as a country will not all is lost. In the private sector, we have beacons of hope. We have Bob Collymore, we have Polycarp, we have Patrick Obath, we have many, and including people in the panel here, who are strong ethical leaders. I have encountered and interacted with political leaders who espouse high integrity and high ethical practice. Governor Malombe in Kitui, Mutava Misimi, there are many, and I would not want to talk about them today. Let me just say that for us to develop ethical leadership as a country, we need to really strengthen the institutions of governance. We need to look at the ethics and anti-corruption. We need to look at the judiciary. We need to look at Parliament and ensure that they espouse those very important values. We need to also look at our own ideological foundation. We need to go back to our children and ensure that from a very early age, they are taught that ethical values are important for the development of the country. Let me close by quoting and by stating that unethical behavior is evil. And to cite a quotation that says, nothing works better for evil than for good people to do nothing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kiprono Kittony, there for your sentiments as well on ethical leadership this morning. We need to ask ourselves probing questions, as he says, what is it I would like to achieve with my leadership? At the end of my tenure, what will I really say, what are the highlights of my leadership? What will people say at the end of my tenure, right? So he says as well that poverty makes it difficult for people to espouse ethical values because people will come with money, and of course this also will sort of, brainwash them, and they can't really tell that demarcation line between the good and bad. And also we need to strengthen our institutions as well. We normally talk about Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission. They don't have, that power to prosecute. And of course, looking at today's editorial cartoon in the Daily Nation, you can see that also the current chair is struggling to make sure that he's giving a bite to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission as well. We want to hear what you're saying also. We want to also look at the rush of tweets as we have this morning, just to get a sentiment of what also Kenyans are thinking about ethical leadership. And Usha, she's going to take it away. Usha.
Right, your comments are flowing in. It seems this is a topic you are interested about, and as well you should be, because leadership affects all of us. We were asking on our question, just give me a minute. It seems it's acting up. Maybe we'll just start with Twitter, where we have Leila Winston, who says, good leaders must be deeply connected with their constituency for real accountability, a leadership of actions versus words. We also have Robert, who says, is Kenya grown up enough to embrace ethical leadership? When one of our own leads, we want them to tilt things our way. Actually, this is very true and very interesting. Leadership and ethics has to first come from us, perhaps. And we have Paul Karanja, who says, if our leaders had the same zeal they had when thronging into church to do good to us, we would be miles ahead. As for now, it is just them for them. We have Ms. Tessie, who reiterates just what has been said here, which is values, vision, voice, virtue, the 4 V's defining ethical leadership. We have Lord Tywin, who says, wish our politicians were tuned into AM Live and TV, but the best thing is that the voters are. Brilliant panel. We also have Mkenya Daima, who says, an ethical leader is one who cares about what his or her people will say at the end of their leadership tenure. And finally, on Twitter, we have Esther Pasaris, who says, hashtag ethnic leaders ain't ethical leaders, hence unable to comprehend the need and how to of inclusivity. They thrive on divisions at all cost. Right, I'll just try to open the Facebook once more. I'm not sure it will work. Yes, it seems it's working this time. So our question was, will you elect an ethical leader come August the 8th? And we have Wanjohi Wagidhinji, who says, I am lacking one, so no need to vote. That is a sad state of affairs. Right, so keep your comments coming. Remember, this is a conversation that needs to keep going, not only during this political season, but all through, because we need good leadership, not only in politics, in our companies, in our organizations, everywhere. So do keep the conversation going, and we'll be glad to read your tweets and your comments. Back to you, Debarl.
Right, many thanks indeed, Usha. But before I let you go as well, maybe you can also tap on the touchscreen that we have an editorial cartoon there from the Daily Nation, where we can see the ethics and anti-corruption. Or before you even head there, the standard is very, very key today when it comes to the editorial cartoon that we have when we come to electing our leaders as well, that we want also to pose to our panelists as we're discussing that, right? Allow me just to walk over there so that I can help Usha with it. In the standard, and it's all about ethical leadership, right? Allow me just to come to where you are, Usha. I show you where it is. Here we go. And this is what we want to discuss about today. Look, this has been drawn by Gado today, and these are some of your leaders that you want to elect. Vote for him. Isn't he a criminal and a convicted thug? This is a probing question from the journalist. And of course, the voter is saying he's our convicted thug, right? You can see the person with the bling bling there and the dollar signs all around. Also, we can see that one is asking, the female voter, well, she is our own crook. Then we can see, so she is our ordained thief as well. Kura kwa bishop. One of our bishop also has been arraigned in court recently. And you can see also a thug there. Yeah, he is our drug lord. Kura kwa sultan. Kura kula kwa sultan. Usha. And then this is just what we're talking about this morning with Usha as well. But I want just to throw it to a panelist. Let's begin with Polycarp. First of all, what do you think about today's editorial cartoon?
You know, you've got to give it to the cartoonists. They really know how to push it. But what they're saying is factual. I think we must ask ourselves, when we go to the vote this time round, there's not enough preaching. Why do we choose people who cannot do the job? We basically go to choose people who will only serve an exclusive constituency. I think that is an individual question. It's a question I'm asking of myself, and I'm inviting the rest of Kenyans to ask it at an individual level, because that cartoon is truly, truly challenging, and it's a crisis. But having said that, we've seen also very genuine, good people come across, especially through the primaries. We've seen excellent people who contribute. I saw a gentleman who's a cook in a school. I saw a small medium business person elected. So we need that balance. But at the national level, especially at governor level, we really need to get this message.
Right. Thank you. Right. We shall be discussing this with the panelist. Usha, thank you. This is what you will be electing. Of course, we'll be asking the probing questions as journalists, and we'll give you that particular chance also to elect your leaders. Flora, what do you think about today's editorial cartoon in the Standard?
It's interesting. It's interesting. Like he says, they're really pushing it. But for me, I look at it as a very sad situation, because by the time you're saying that is my convicted thug, there's something you're connecting with that person. Is it you're choosing him because maybe you know him? Is there a favor you're going to get? As opposed to looking at a bigger picture. So for me, it's a very short-sighted approach, because looking at a bigger picture, you want somebody who will use your resources properly. You want somebody who will prioritize the issue in your community properly. You want somebody who will push national policies that will take you to a better place. So looking at this short-term gain, perhaps because I can get access to this person, or I know this person, or it is important to have my person sitting in parliament representing my area. Whoever you choose will still come from your area. It might not be somebody you know, but choosing somebody ethical for me is more a long-term approach. And it saddens me that people want to see such a short view.
All right. And Kiprono, you ask a very interesting question. That's what will people say at the end of my tenure? Looking at that particular editorial cartoon, if we may just have it. Of course, we can see some of the leaders there. We can't mention their names, but of course it's up to you to know who they are, right? What will you say at the end of their tenure when it comes to August the 8th, 2017? Some of these leaders. This is some of the grid that we say we should be passing through, especially with the leadership and integrity chapter of the Constitution. Please, let's have the editorial cartoon. So the issue is even right now, we have the Kenya National Human Rights Commission who have moved to court to get an advisory opinion on the leadership and integrity, Chapter 6 of the Constitution. You say that we should fault the Constitution because it has not really espoused or really shown what an ethical leader should be. So,
Debarl, I think it's a brilliant cartoon, and it really captures the situation that Kenya is faced with today. Polycarp earlier said that we have a leadership crisis. I want to add that we also have a crisis of those being led. Because we who are led, and really the best leaders in Kenya are actually not in politics because they find it too murky. And the reality is we are now left with nothing but what we are seeing on the screen there today. I would say 80% of our political class is actually caricatured by that cartoon today. And for me, I want to go back to what I stated in my presentation, that we need to go back to our ideological foundation. We need to go back to our value system. We need to stop being that society where the end justifies the means. We need to stop the glorification of wealth despite where it comes from. And I think those things are not easy to achieve, and it really takes a top-down approach. I do know that President Kenyatta, for example, is one leader who really wants the best for this country. But it's very difficult for him to push that agenda when the very institutions that are supposed to help him deliver that are completely compromised. I mean, we haven't, as a country, supported institutions that are supposed to ensure that we end up with better leaders. And having said that, I mean, and I'm talking about the institutions, all those leaders that you see today have gone through all the checks. They have received their clearances from ethics and anti-corruption. They have received their clearances from the KRA. How do they achieve all that when everybody knows exactly what they're up about?
Good. So looking at the 4 V's that you gave us, Phyllis, are they visionary, right? When you talk about virtues, do they embody any virtue in terms of integrity, and when you talk about morality and values as well? When we look at when you look also at their voice, right? I don't know what you'll explain to us what you actually mean by the voice. Do they really speak to, or do their voice really resonate with wananchi, or there's a wide berth, you know, between them and wananchi as well?
That cartoon is quite interesting. I've looked at it and really smiled. Something that has been said is, show me the heroes the youth of your country look up to, and we can show you the future of your country. If you look at the population today, we have 16 million voters going to vote on August the 8th, and 60% of them are going to be aged between 18 and 35. So if our youth look up to people who are not ethical, that's the kind of leadership we get, and that's the future we have as a country. So for me, this is really a challenge to all of us. As we go out and vote, what kind of leaders are we going to vote for? Are we going to look at people because they are our thug, as it said there, our own crook? Or are we going to elect leaders who are ethical, who have the values, who have the virtue, who have the voice, who speak to the societal needs that are affecting us today and are ready to live up and deliver the promises that they make? Because where we've reached, we look at wealth. If you go to the village, I was in the village on leave the week before the nominations, and leaders were driving around handing over 50,000, so the villagers would run out and collect the 50,000 and go back to their homes. And for me, it was a sad situation, because that means that we're not going to vet these leaders that are standing up for political office. We're going to make decisions either based on how much they gave us, how wealthy they are, how popular they are, but not really because of the values they stand up for. So I hope the conversation we're having today is going to resonate with the people, and we're going to sit back and ask, when someone comes to speak to you about being elected, you ask them, what issues are you going to address? When you become a leader, what will you promise to do so that we hold you accountable? Otherwise, we will have a very sad situation, and our country will not get to where it needs to get to.
Right.
Because as the voters, we need to hold leaders accountable.
You talk of selling your soul. Yeah, a leader who doesn't really sell his soul. What do you really mean by a leader who doesn't really sell his soul?
Well, let me give you. Remember 21st September 2013 when Westgate was attacked? If you go down that story, you wonder where these terrorists were getting their ammunition from. But cut a long story short, there was somebody who had subcontracted a shop inside Westgate to allow these people to come. Is that not selling your soul? When you're a soldier and you've been assigned to take care of Hulugo border post, and you allow a couple of Al-Shabaab terrorists to come through because they've given you 100,000 shillings, because some people have done that.
Yes.
When I, as a chief executive, accept a few million shillings,
yes,
and I collapse a company as important as Vivo that employs thousands of people, What have I done? That is what is called selling your soul. And I think I want to pick up on Kiprono's challenge this morning and admit we Kenyans have sold our souls. When this cartoon is just telling us, the cartoonist is telling us, you have sold your souls, Kenyans. You have completely sold your souls. And the worst thing is the people who sell their souls the most are the ones who preach about the souls.
Yes.
You know, when I go to a building and I see this is a not, what do they say? This is a corruption-free zone, I always shudder. Or if you start with a big religious line, I shudder. And I think good people are doing nothing. We have elected to do nothing. We are not standing up to be counted. We are not in the ground, which they call the ground, with the followers to activate it. We have abdicated. And I think there's nothing worse than a country that sells its soul. Because there's, in geopolitics today, there's a second scramble of Africa. You have China here, you have Japan here, you have America here, you have Russia here. These people just come and buy our souls and make us colonizers again if we are not careful. If we can't, 54 years after independence, our generation can't say we will do the right thing, then we are really in trouble. But let me close by saying it's not lost because we have done well over time. So there is a class of us, there is a number of people out there who are doing the best but totally suffering. If you go to very many institutions, and I've worked in private sector in very many companies, every company I've joined, the best people, the most honest ones were the most frustrated. And I can say that also about our civil service. If you look at some of the high integrity people, they are the most frustrated, they are the most put down, they are the most unacknowledged people. And if that is the same in private sector, is the same in civil society. How have we let all these people who sell souls take it, lord it over us? Is a question we have to ask ourselves.
Thank you.
How do we fight back?
How do we fight back? Question of upbringing, right? It all begins with our formative years. Do we need to question that when we're asking about ethical leaders?
Yes, I believe we do. I believe we need, and more importantly, I'm of the firm belief that children do not bring up themselves. We bring up the youth. So as a parent, you've always got to be very careful, like it was said by one of my counterparts. What are they seeing? What is following them? What example are we leading? And one of the the tenets of a good leader is somebody who leads by example. So it actually is very embarrassing for us to sit here, look at a cartoon like that, and maybe some of us are not doing enough about it. What can we do? Have we stood up to say, are we sure this is the right person? Have we stood up to say the value that was put in chapter 6 it was? Are we saying, how are we promoting this? How are we driving this? But perhaps no, we want to sit in our comfort zone, watch what is happening happen and say, oh my, it happened. We saw it happen to one of our nation, to America the other day. But we can change this. We can change this if we actually look at what are we passing through to the children, what are the children picking up, and making sure that we change the narrative to have a better education. To have a better nation.
All right. Strengthening our institutions also is very key as well. And maybe also I should show you another editorial cartoon that we have today, and that is in the People Daily. I'll show you much later. But as I prepare to go there, maybe Kiprono can actually talk to us. Kiprono can talk to us about what you mentioned when it comes to making very crucial judgment and decisions regarding maybe your staff or regarding also your position, that you know there is an ethical issue that has come to the fore. Right now we know what is happening with Fox News and Bill O'Reilly, and how also Bill O'Reilly was really drawing in a lot of advertisement for Fox News, and they were grappling with this issue of whether they should let Bill O'Reilly go because he's been involved in sexual scandals as well. And they really came to defend Bill, but at the end of the day, he had to go. These are places where we can see the president also has come with very, very ticklish issues concerning ethical issues, corruption being one of them, and still we can see they're still twiddling their thumbs on what to do with these people.
I want to say that it is obviously very challenging when one has to make a decision that is unprofitable, that is unpopular, yes. That perhaps will lead the organization not to profit in the short run, but benefit in the longer term. I think it's more really a decision about, the short-term view as opposed to the longer-term view in a situation like that. And for me, I think it should be a non-negotiable thing that one should make the decision that is based on ensuring that you have a better ethical environment. And I think as a country, that has been our huge challenge. And again, it goes back to really the value systems of the country. Mm-hmm. We must start to recognize, we must start to celebrate ethical leadership. And we do not do that. Even if we look every year, we see the government awards national honors. And it is given automatically to those in the political class and to those in high positions in the civil service. Mm-hmm. But in reality, what are we celebrating? What are those honors for? I don't think we've ever even interrogated those aspects and asked ourselves whether that should be the outcome of what we are trying to do and what are we celebrating as a country. Mm-hmm. So for me, I think it's a non-negotiable issue. I have, where I can, personally, to the best of my ability, practiced what I preach.
Thank you. We'll hear from our callers, and of course, before we continue the conversation, let's just take our callers hanging on the line. We have Otua Sifuna hanging on the line. Good morning, Otua Sifuna.
Hello, good morning, Debarl Inea.
Morning to you.
Yeah, this is Otua Sifuna.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to give you very fast quotations, Debarl.
Yes.
One is that Socrates is the one who said that some people are born subjects, while a very few are born to be leaders.
Yes.
And number two, when I was at the university, I was told that a child is born a tabula rasa, an empty slate. Debarl, those quotations are based on two tenets, that this country has failed us in leadership. There are only two institutions that are left to nurture leadership. One is the school, where I am a proud teacher. We have done the best, Debarl, to the students who are even the old cliche that they are the leaders of tomorrow. We have demystified that. We have done the best as the teachers of this country. And number two is the church. Look at what is happening at the political front of this. Leadership has failed. People have become more than hyenas. They are eating even for the blind to see. They have no role modeling. Debarl, you cannot talk of leadership without role modeling, because leadership is just transitional.
Right.
Today, Debarl is in a national media group. Tomorrow, Debarl is not there. So he must nurture the next generation to come and fix it. But what can we learn? There's that reggae music that sang. Look at our country. Look at our school. Look at our hospital. Look at the price of food. Is there anything to smile about? There is absolutely nothing, Debarl Inea.
Thank you.
This country, I am one of the Kenyans who is very, very sympathetic.
Thank you.
Very saddened.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Otua Sifuna. We have Lemmy also hanging on the line. Thank you, Otua Sifuna. Lemmy, good morning.
Thank you.
All right, good morning, Lemmy. Kindly, Lemmy, if you can also turn down on the volume of your television so that we can hear you clearly. All right, seem we have some difficulty with Lemmy there, but right, let's come to reactions from you as well as we're winding up. He talks, of course, he sounds frustrated, Otua Sifuna there, but also there is this cartoon that we have also on the screen. And in light of what we're going through, we know donor funding also, they're pulling away, they're folding because of issue of corruption in this country. And this is what we had Victor aptly capturing in the Star yesterday. It's all about corruption. We can see Uncle Sam, they are walking away. If we just drop the text so that we can see it clearly. And then we have that particular bottle with the trademark of corruption. And they're saying Ministry of Health junking at Uncle Sam's expense. Corruption has become a big issue in this country. And when we talk about ethical leadership, and you said that we should strengthen our institution, and I want Phyllis to weigh in on strengthening our institutions as well, and as we're preparing our headline thoughts as well. Do we have that political will to strengthen these institutions?
Institutions are critical because what they do is that they create a framework. They lead to accountability. And if anyone is out of line, they are called to order. So it is important, as Kiprono said, to strengthen these institutions that exist.
Yes.
I believe the certain leadership at the political level is keen about strengthening these institutions, but some of the people who are culprits of what we see are not keen about it. So it's always a battle between good and evil. But at the end of the day, we must ensure that these institutions stand as independent vetting institutions so that we ensure that people do not get away with unethical behavior. But more than anything for these issues, we speak a lot about ethics and leadership and point externally. But we must realize that it starts with us, because leadership is not only about the people who hold positions, but at a personal level, we influence from the decisions we make, from the things we do, whether or not we hold positions of authority. So I think before we point our fingers as much as we do, we need to also look at the speck in our own eyes and ensure that we are doing the right thing wherever we are.
All right, thank you. All right, strengthening institutions. Polycarp, as we're winding up, your headline thoughts?
My headline thoughts is all is not lost. I think what has happened is that ethical people have become cowards in our country. They are not taking the war. And this is a global phenomenon. We've seen Tour de France, people cheating. You've seen people cheating in big organizations around the world. But coming down to Kenya, I think we need courage. The toolkit of getting ethical leadership is courage and creativity. The people who are ethical must start to become a lot more courageous to call out lack of ethics in the country. And lastly, I want to weigh in on donor funding. I think I'm of a different view. I think the situation here, I don't see it so much as to do with corruption. I think it's geopolitics. Right now, our president is in China for the One Belt, One Road. There must be somebody who's seen competition because we are we are a region that everybody is looking to come. So maybe they want us to pay attention.
All right, thank you, Flora. Strengthening our institution, and this is what we are trying to do even as we look at the editorial cartoon in the People Daily. Briefly, 30 seconds.
All right, I think it is an important fight, and I do believe the government is trying as much as it can to strengthen the institutions. Unfortunately, like was said earlier, there are the good and the evil. The people who are obviously making sure, because of perhaps the self-seeking gain. I think it's something we need to address. We need to address this self-seeking and ensure that those kind of people do not see any leadership positions.
Thank you. Kiprono.
Finally, our constitution provides a 30% gender rule. At the expense of being accused of being this product of a strong mother, I have a great faith in the women of this country. And I think the more we strengthen the women of this country, the higher chance we have for being an ethical country. And for me, I'd like to challenge the voters and the people of this country to ask themselves one very important, fundamental, and personal question. The leader that you are going to elect, assuming you're in a situation where you and your wife had to travel somewhere, and you had to leave your children with somebody for 3 days, would you leave your child with that person for 3 days and be sure that you'll come back and find your child in the condition that they were when you left them? And finally, I'd like to just ask the voters of this country to vote on the basis of vision, not on the basis of tribe, on the basis of money, but on the basis of what that person will deliver and take you, the journey they will take you in terms of achieving the aspirations of Vision 2030.
Thank you.